Rooikat Armoured Fighting Vehicle is a modern South African wheeled recon vehicle and tank destroyer. It was developed for the National Defence Force when the country was still under an arms embargo. Due to these restrictions, the export of this vehicle was rather unlikely, which allowed it to be adapted strictly to the requirements of the South African Army. As a result, a very successful vehicle was created, considered by some to be one of the best in its class in the 1990s. At present, the South African Armed Forces are the only users of the Rooikat vehicles. Hi there, and welcome to our channel. On opening the box, I was struck by the large number of parts that the model had. Everything was neatly packed with only 1 or 2 sprues per bag. This was a good sign, as it meant less damage from parts rubbing up against each other, especially the clear parts of windows and headlights. The larger model sections were packed in a separate compartment, which was an added precaution against damage to the plastic finish. The various parts had crisp details, and there was no visible flash around the edges of the model's components. The panel lines were deeply recessed, which would facilitate easier application of accent colors and allow effortless weathering. The clear parts were of a decent quality and were undamaged due to their separate packaging. The rubber tires were possibly my favorite feature of this Trumpeter kit. They were very well molded without any visible seam lines and had a surprising amount of detail. Okay, they were supposed to have the words Bush Radial, but there was a U instead of a D, so I guess they were Bush Radials. Another bonus is the included photo etch parts, which are especially welcome as they would add a lot more detail to the vehicle's air intake grills. Okay, there's another typo. I just couldn't let it go. There was even a small decal sheet which included various license plate numbers and some cab art. The instruction booklet was well illustrated with handy sprue diagrams and step-by-step visual descriptions for easy assembly of the model. A separate painting and marking guide was also included, although the paint callouts were more partial for the Mr. Color range of paints. And so we embark on yet another exciting model building journey. As always, my only request, if you haven't already done so, please hit those like and subscribe buttons, which helps us to feed that hungry YouTube algorithm monster. To start, some small bits were glued onto the lower hull of the vehicle. This included the headlights, which were mostly going to be obscured in the finished model, but were a fun detail to have. The next step was to build 8 suspension systems and install them on the model. The back section of the vehicle had loads of small details, such as chain loops, an axe and a pickaxe head. The first photo etch part was a grab handle at the back of the vehicle, which I attached with some CA glue. The lower hull was completed by joining the newly built front and rear sub-assemblies to the larger hull section. The rest of the photo etch which was included with the model would add extra detail to the engine's air intake grills. All of these were also glued in using the same quick-setting gel-type CA glue I had used earlier. After adding some clear parts, I glued the 2 sections of the lower hull together. Once the barrel housing sub-assembly was completed, I fitted the turret halves together. The 2 parts of the barrel were also glued and cleaned up, ready to be added to the model. Design work on the Rooikat started in 1982 and series production started in 1987 and is still ongoing. The main armament is a single 76mm Denel GT4 cannon, and the secondary armament is two 7.62mm machine guns. The Rooikat's design focused on delivering the best possible performance, both in the field and on the road. Drive from the 420 kilowatt diesel engine is transferred through an automatic 6-speed gearbox via internally mounted differentials and drive shaft to the road wheels. Average speeds of 50 km per hour can be attained over rough terrain, where 8x8 drive can be selected with a choice of differential locks on all wheels. Maximum gradients of 70% can be achieved. Trenches of 1 meter wide are no obstacle. Even at more than 60 km an hour, the vehicle can cross 2 meter wide trenches and do 1 meter vertical climbs at crawl speeds. Before painting, I used a liquid mask to screen off all of the clear parts and left it to dry overnight. While the liquid mask does look a bit random and messy during application, once dry, the overpaint is easily cleared away using a sharp scalpel blade. As I was using the Mr. Color range of paints, I could forego the need of a surface primer. The first color adheres well to the plastic model's surface and acts as an undercoat for the next layer of paint. Using an airbrush, I applied the initial layer, a yellow-brown mixture of Mr. Color Sandy Brown and Sail Color. I allowed this to dry for a few minutes and then grabbed some AK camouflage elastic putty. By following the painting guide which was included in the instructions, I tried to mask off the yellow-brown parts as closely as possible. Later I figured out I had used way too much putty and could have applied it in much thinner layers. Oh well, it was a rookie mistake, and everything turned out just fine in the end. At this stage, I painted all of the rims of the wheels in this same color. After a few minutes, I masked off the central parts of the wheel rims with a liquid mask. My plan was to go from the lighter colors of the camouflage pattern to the darker ones. For this reason, I decided to apply the green part of the camo pattern next. I made sure to get maximum coverage across the entire surface of the model. After about 10 minutes drying time, lacquers are awesome that way, I went back to the paint guide and masked off all the areas on the Rooikat which needed to remain green. Whatever was left over would receive a final brown coat. For the last part of the paint pattern, I used Mr. Color Red Brown and applied this liberally across the model. I did the same for the wheel rims, and when I'd removed the masks, they looked awesome. After the brown paint had dried, I realized that the area under the turret had not received any of the green and brown camouflage colors. So I removed the turret and improvised a quick pattern. I could not use the airbrush to apply any green paint, as this would mess up the brown color which was already on the rest of the Rooikat's hull. For this reason, I masked off relatively large sections in order to brush paint a bit of green later. I removed the elastic putty very slowly. It is a highly amorphous substance and continues to spread slowly across the surface of the model after one lays the pattern down, almost like a living creature. This is a good thing, as it means that it oozes into the panel lines, which automatically seals them off, and also oozes around those small flimsy bits, making sure to cover them up. As an added bonus, the putty is very low tack, so it barely sticks to the surface of anything that it touches, which makes it a way better option than using super sticky poster tack, which was my weapon of choice in the past. By working slowly and carefully, I managed to remove the putty without too much damage to the delicate railings and grab handles. The Mr. Color range is great for airbrushing, but not so much for brush painting, and I needed to do several coats before I was happy with the coverage. Likely no one would ever even look under the turret, but if they do, hopefully they will be suitably impressed. At this point, I removed the liquid masks which were protecting the clear parts. I was still going to apply 2 coats of varnish, but decided to remove the masks early to check if I'd missed a spot. Once the paint was touched up in the areas which were previously covered by liquid mask, I covered them up again, this time with some paper tape. After a light gloss coat, I applied the decals, there were only 3 of them, and then applied some Tamiya panel line accent color to all of those wonderful recessed panel lines and around some of the other features such as railings, grab handles and aerials. Once dry, I followed up with cotton buds which were slightly dampened with odorless white spirits and gently cleaned away the excess panel liner. I applied a final coat of matte varnish, my go-to Mr. Color GX114. This sealed in all of the paint and toned down the shine of the gloss coat. Once again, I made sure to cover every nook and cranny of the model. I used an oil wash to add some streaks to the sides of the vehicle and slightly blackened up the engine grills and exhausts with some soot color from a Tamiya weathering kit. To dirty up the tires a little, I used some Humbrol weathering powder which I mixed with some water and slathered all over the tires. After this muddy layer had dried, I used a dry paper towel to wipe off the excess weathering powder. This left the edges of the tires slightly dirty and the tread patterns of the tires looking good and dusty. The wheels are fitted with run-flat elements which enable the vehicles to travel at a speed of 30 km per hour for up to 50 km with any number of flat tires. Even with a loss of 2 wheels on the same side, the vehicle is still sufficiently mobile to reach a safe area. I popped the wheels onto the model. They were a tight fit and didn't even need any glue. As a final task, I installed those super flimsy side view mirrors. And with that, I called her done. So long, and I thank you for watching.